Hi, everyone. Today I'll be walking you through the automated financial dashboard that I've built for QUAAF. The goal of this template is to give you a fast and automated way to gather large amounts of financial data and generate an automated valuation using both the DCF and comparable company methods. Please keep in mind that this is meant to be used as a starting point, not a final model. The idea is to use this template to quickly get you the data that you need, along with a back of the envelope valuation before you start digging deeper and building a full financial model. I highly recommend for you to try and build your own template, but feel free to use this one as a starting point and modify it however you like. Learning how to use the Capital IQ Excel plugin has been one of the most practical skills that I've picked up as a student. It might look like a lot of work, but once you get familiar with this tool, it's really not that hard to create extremely useful templates for yourself. For reference, I've built this entire template from scratch just over the weekend. So let's get started. The template has 8 sections. The first few sheets automatically fetch financial data for any stock that you wish to analyze. And the last few sections is for your DCF, comparable company analysis, as well as a summary of your implied prices. Let's start with the first sheet called Overview. Okay, so you'll notice that I've built a control panel at the top of every sheet with a few yellow cells. These are the only inputs that you need to make. Everything else is fully automated and pulled from Capital IQ's database. Here you need to make 3 entries: which company you want to analyze, in what currency, and the date. The currency being set to local just means whatever currency the company reports in, but you can always just simply type USD or CAD or any other currency, and Capital IQ will automatically recognize it. So right now we have Boston Scientific selected, but we can change that to any stock on any exchange in the world. Let's change it to Apple, for example. We would simply enter Apple's ticker at the top and hit enter. And you can see that all of the charts and data are updated to reflect Apple's financial data. Now that you understand how to control the model, let's go over the content of the template. The first section gives us a few charts. The first 2 charts are a price volume chart and a return comparison between our selected stock and the industry index it belongs to. You'll notice a drop-down menu over here that lets us change the time period of our charts and data. Currently, it's set to 5 years. Let's change it to 3 years, for example. And you can see that the charts and data are both updated. And I made these charts dynamic so that you never have to manually update them other than formatting them for presentation purposes. You also have an industry selection dropdown over here. This allows you to compare our selected stocks' cumulative returns to any industry index that you want. By default, the model will compare our selected stocks industry index that it belongs to. In this case, for Apple, that's technology hardware, but we can change that to anything we like. So let's change the industry to consumer discretionary, for example. And you can see that nothing actually happened once we clicked consumer discretionary. And that's because there is a tick box over here next to custom industry selection. So if you don't tick this box, the model will continue comparing our company's actual industry to the stock price. So let's tick this box. And now you can see that our chart is updated to show our selected stock compared to the custom industry selection that we've made. Now that we have this box ticked, we could go ahead and compare the stock to any other industry. So for example, let's select telecommunications. You can see once again, the chart is fully dynamic and is updated to reflect our selection. Once we untick this box, the chart will simply revert back to the default industry selection, which is the industry that our selected stock actually belongs to. Below, we have two additional charts comparing our selections to the S&P 500. Next, we have the company's cap table over the past 5 years, and below that, we have the company's financial statements in a standardized form. That just means that these statements are not in the same format as what the company uses in its official filings. Having the financial statements in a standardized format makes things easier because different companies use different formats to present their financial statements. Of course, it also means that some of our intermediate items might not line up exactly with the official filings, but I've structured the model in such a way that all of the major line items will always match the values in the official statements. So starting with the income statement, we have another drop-down menu where we can now switch between calendarized and fiscal values. So let's switch this to fiscal, for example, and we can see that Capital IQ is able to make that adjustment for us, that all of the values are automatically updated based on our selection. Remember, everything that you see here is linked to Capital IQ. So when we change the company using the control panel at the top, for example, let's switch to another company. Let's say Dollarama. We would just enter Dollarama's ticker at the top and hit enter. And you can see that all of the values and charts are updated to reflect Dollarama's financials. I left some blank spaces on both sides of the statements, just in case you want to add any charts, notes, or additional analysis. The chart on the left here is just a placeholder I added as an example. Lastly, I know some of you are coming from different programs at Queens and might not have an accounting or finance background. So I've added notes for certain items to help you. For example, for DNA on the income statement, I put a note as to why you would want to always use the DNA from the cash flow statement and why it might be different on the income statement if it appears on it at all. Or, for example, what income or loss from affiliate means, or what does impairment of goodwill mean. So hopefully these small notes help you along the way in case you're feeling confused. Next, we have our cash flow statement. And again, since this is a standardized financial statement, the intermediate items shown are the ones that I personally chose to include because I think they're useful. But you can always modify the template to include or exclude any intermediate items that you want. Just make sure that you structure it in such a way that your major line items always match the values reported in the company's actual financial statements. So for example, in the cash flow from investing activities section, I chose to include specific intermediate items like cash paid for acquisitions, real estate transactions, and a few more. Now, to make sure that our total cash flow from investing activities always matches the reported value in the company's actual statements, we need to do two things. We need to pull the total value directly from Capital IQ so that we know the correct number it should be. So this major line item, cash flow from investing activities, is pulled directly from Capital IQ using this formula you can see here at the top in the formula bar. And then we use a plug value, which I labeled other investment items, just to find the difference between our total and the sum of the intermediate items that we chose to show. So in this case, it works out to be $0 just because the list of our intermediate items is comprehensive enough to capture all of those amounts. So basically, if the company has any additional uh, investing activities that we didn't break out specifically, they'll get captured in this other line item. Another important point to keep in mind is that even the names of the line items are standardized. So for example, what Capital IQ labels as cash acquisitions might appear as a purchase of businesses or something similar in the company filings. Lastly, we have our balance sheet. And again, I added a few notes to help you with certain items that might be confusing to you, like minority interest or AOCI, for example. And you'll notice that the numbers here are colored in green, and that just means that they're linked to another sheet. And I've intentionally structured this differently from the income and cash flow statement to show you that you can also simply link everything on this sheet to our next sheet called financial statements, which we'll look at next. So this sheet has our standardized financial statements, including every possible intermediate item that Capital IQ has available in its database. Now, you'll notice that a lot of these values are showing up as zeros, and that's normal. It just means that the item is either not relevant for a selected company or that our selected company didn't report those specific items in their official filings. At the top, we have our control panel again. We can also use this control panel to change our selected company. So let's change our selection from Dollarama to Chevron, for example. We just enter the ticker and hit enter. If the data isn't loaded instantly, you'll get these refresh symbols while Capital IQ is downloading the data into your Excel file. Okay, and as you can see, the values are updated based on our selection on this sheet's control panel. This specific control panel also has a few additional drop-down menus where you can choose things like calendarized or fiscal, uh, years, quarters, halves. You can also choose your currency conversion to present the data based on the historical exchange rates or the current exchange rate. The layout of the sheet follows a simple structure. We have each of the three financial statements, income statement, cash flow, and balance sheet. And within each statement, we have every possible intermediate item that you can expect from pretty much any company in any industry. Below our financials, we have a few additional sections with a variety of helpful metrics, things like valuation multiples, profitability ratios, margin analysis, Z-score, growth rates, and so on. Finally, at the bottom of each financial statement, you'll notice an orange box titled Supplemental. If we expand that box, let's say for the income statement, you'll get a massive standardized list of every single supplemental item that Capital IQ tracks for your selected company. Again, many of these will show up as zeros, either because the item is not relevant for your company or it just wasn't disclosed in their official filings. So overall, this sheet acts like your data warehouse. It holds a massive collection of raw data that powers the rest of the model. All right, this next section is probably my favorite because it uses a very powerful function called CIQ matrix. What makes this function so powerful is that we can leverage it to pull a company's actual financial statement into Excel in the exact same format that they're presented in their actual filings. So the exact same line item names, structure, everything. As mentioned before, each company reports its financials differently. Some break things down in more detail, use different naming conventions, and choose to include or exclude certain line items. The CIQ matrix function is built to handle all of that. It's fully dynamic, meaning that the number of rows and columns it can return will change depending on how the company structures its statements. For example, one company might have 20 rows in its income statement, while another might have 60 line items with a completely different naming convention. And the CIQ matrix formula is able to handle all of these different variations. So right now we have it set to $AMA. Let's change that to Tesla, for example. And you can see that the entire structure of the statement changes. The number of line items, their naming conventions are all updated to the exact same layout that is used in Tesla's official filings. So you basically never have to do any manual data entry to copy a company's financial statement into Excel. This sheet is a great tool when you want to see how a company actually presents their financial statements in their official filings and have that information instantly downloaded into your Excel file. Here's our automated DCF. Let's start with our control panel at the top. Right now, our target company is set to Dollarama, and we have a few inputs here where we can set our discount rate assumptions. These can either be manually entered, pulled from Capital IQ, or calculated separately in a different sheet and linked in. We also have an automated summary that shows the implied prices calculated by the model, as well as Capital IQ's price targets, labeled here as CIQ targets. If we scroll down, you'll actually see that I've made a couple of charts to compare our model's implied prices to the CIQ price targets, just to help you visualize the difference. And again, everything here is fully automated. So for example, let's change the target company from Dollarama to Apple. So we just enter Apple's ticker and hit enter. And you'll see that we're getting all of these error messages that notify us that the financial statement sheet is still set to TSX DOL. So this is a common mistake, a common issue in automated models that are linked across multiple sheets. You have to make sure that the sheets are linked together. So before we go any further, let's link our financial statement sheet to our DCF. Okay, now that they're synced, the error messages disappear and the model works properly. Now that everything is linked, we can easily switch companies. So let's change it to Boston Scientific. We'll just enter the ticker and hit enter. And you'll see that there won't be any errors and that the model is updating as expected. Let's move on to the assumptions section over here. This first table is for our driver assumptions. By default, the model will use historical averages for the assumptions as placeholders. You can see these averages over here. So these are just historical averages that are used as placeholders. Uh, of course, the table itself is full of yellow cells just to indicate that these should be inputs. So Once you've done your research or formed your own estimates, you should manually enter them here. Once you've entered your assumptions, the summary table on the right will automatically reflect whichever scenario is selected in the control panel. So right now we have it set to base case scenario. Let's change that to the bull case, for example. And you'll notice that the table colors changes to green, and now this reflects a summary of the assumptions for that bull case scenario. If we keep scrolling down, we have a DCF summary on the left side, as well as a summary of our WACC calculation to the right. Again, these can be pulled from Capital IQ or calculated manually and directly entered into these cells. Below, we have a sensitivity table where you can manually enter discount rates. And next, we have a few visuals. These charts show you how your driver assumptions look like over time for the selected scenario in the control panel. So right now it's set to bull. We could change that back to the base case. And since we're still using the historical averages as placeholders, obviously everything is flat for now. You can select any driver to visualize. Let's switch this from CapEx to COGS, for example. And you can see that the chart is dynamic and it just updates itself. You don't have to edit it or anything like that. Below, we have another chart showing the forecasted outputs for a few key metrics based on our assumptions across all three scenarios simultaneously. So right now it's set to EBITDA, but we could change that to revenue or unlevered free cash flows. Of course, you can always add more metrics to this list as you wish. And below that, we have the same CIQ price targets versus our implied prices visuals that I've shown you earlier. Finally, at the bottom, we have our historical and projected financials used in the DCF. Right now, these are linked directly to the financial statement sheet, but I've marked them with yellow cells. And just to remind you that in case you want to enter your own values manually, you can always do that. And over here, we have our last yellow input cell, which lets you choose between using a mid-year convention or end-of-year convention for the timing of your discount factor. Okay, so next we'll go over the comparable company analysis. All right, so this is our comparable company analysis sheet. We'll start with the control panel at the top. Currently, our target company is set to Boston Scientific. Below, you can see that you can enter up to 4 comparable peers. For this example, let's enter 3 peers. The first one being Medtronic, the second one, Edward Life Sciences, and the last one, Abbott Laboratories. Now that we've entered our peers, the tables below will automatically populate with all of the relevant financial data for each of our selected peers. The first section is your standard comps table. Below, I've added a few visuals to help you quickly compare key metrics between the target company and our selected peers. And further down, you'll find different data tables comparing margins and growth rates between our target company and the peer group average. These tables are just templates. You can customize them however you like. Here we have a detailed comparison table that covers a broad range of metrics. It's very useful for quickly spotting any outliers or patterns that might stand out. If you continue scrolling around, you'll find additional automated data points that I've created throughout the sheet. All of this is designed to make things easier for you when you're analyzing a company. Now let's look at our valuation summary. You'll notice that there are two sections for our valuation multiple ranges. The first one over here is fully automated, and by default, it will use the minimum and maximum multiples from our selected peer group. This will generate the implied price ranges for our target company. To the left, there is a manual input table filled with yellow cells for you to manually enter your own ranges. So just for illustration purposes, let's fill this table with a 5 to 10x range for all of our multiples. And you can see that now the main table is using our manual inputs. If we delete our manual inputs, the main table will revert back to using the automated default ranges. And finally, we have a section that allows us to visually summarize all of our implied prices. That wraps it up for the comparable company analysis and summary sheet. I hope that this tool makes your life easier while you're in QUAAF. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any of the alumni advisors. Thank you for watching and good luck.